Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin Robbie Billups, and it's time for the weekly comic book review. That's right everybody, happy 2019, happy new year. Welcome to the weekly comic book review. It's the show where I read a lot of comic books and I let you know what I thought about them. And we always start with the pick of the week, so let's get right into it. The pick of the week, the first one of 2019, is Immortal Hulk number 11. Now you know that I've kind of had an up and down kind of relationship with this book. I really loved it when it came out, a very strong start for a new Hulk book that's really firmly planted as a horror comic. I unfortunately felt like it started leaning a little too heavy into the Marvel Universe superhero side of things, didn't really fully commit to being 100% a horror comic book, at least for me. And at times it had some elements, right? Some elements that were really cool, very shocking, very scary, very creepy. The first two issues of this were some amazing comic books. This is exactly what I've been waiting for. This issue was great. The basic gist of the story is it's Hulk in hell. That cover by Alex Ross is one of the best covers of the week. One of the best covers of the year, I should say. And just a fantastic story. Al Ewing's doing a great job. He's got some nice explanations in here. He's got a little bit of some philosophy that's coming out about the shadow self and how it relates to evil and good and the Hulk and Banner and things like that. So I really like the ideas that Ewing is throwing out in this story, but also Joe Bennett pumping out the artwork of his career. You got Rai Jose on the inking with Paul Mounts doing the coloring. This book is amazing and is something straight out of like a traditional like old school take on something like hell. Obviously Hulk and others have to come across demons in varying forms. Really fun, more like ghosts than demons, but I mean demon like inner demons, stuff like that. Really fun story, really cool, great, dark, deep type things. Lots of interesting gears start twisting in here. Things are starting to really shift, at least for me, in the Immortal Hulk. I'm starting to find myself liking it more and more. It's resonating more and more and more, and it leads me to believe that it's not the book itself that was the problem, but just that it needed some time to soak in just a little bit. But this issue blew me away. I really liked it. Pick of the week, Immortal Hulk number 11. Also, Marvel celebrates the return of Conan the Barbarian number 1. I know a lot of Conan heads have been out there waiting for this, excited. Marvel did the original Conan comic books back in the day, in the 70s. Then they lost the rights to Dark Horse, and then Dark Horse had a pretty successful run with the character Brian Wood, Kurt Busiek, and others. And then all of a sudden, now they're back at Marvel, and it's going to debut a new Conan the Barbarian story by Jason Aaron, Mahmoud Asrar, and Matthew Wilson. This book was really cool. I'm not the biggest Conan fan out there, so I don't know how long it's going to keep me engaged, but I think anybody who likes this kind of swords and sorcery, fantasy, Conan type stuff, if you're a Conan the Barbarian fan, I think you'll be pleased. The artwork is cool. It's exactly probably what you expect from a Conan book. The story is cool. Jason Aaron has been writing Thor for a long time. This type of story, this type of world, it's definitely somewhere where he feels at home. Matthew Wilson's colors are amazing. The diversity in his own style. Matthew Wilson, he's just such a brilliant colorist. I was really curious to see what his artwork was going to look like on this. You know, I was thinking about what it looked like on Thor, and it was a little bit different when you had Dodderman, right? But on Asrar's pencils, it looks really, really sharp. I really like the coloring in this book. It's very luscious and it's very elegant, and it helps fill this world, this new old world that Aaron is reintroducing Marvel Comics fans to. So this is going to be a big deal for Conan fans. I thought it was pretty decent. It was a really good first issue. And like I said, I'm not the hugest Conan fan, but I did enjoy it. So it's out this week. It's big. It's got lots of fun stuff. It's also got a little, like, they're going to do this like novella throughout it, like these little chapters. So that's kind of cool. Champions relaunches with the new number 1. Why not? Miles Morales is a movie star now. So this book, I've stopped reading, right? So when Mark Waid started this run on Champions, I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was unique and different. I like the approach of these young heroes coming out being like, all the adults are doing are just wasting time, being reactive. They're not changing the world. We're going to do that. We're the next generation. This is what we're going to do. Eventually, I just kind of fell out of the title. Didn't keep my interest for too long. I've known that Jim Zub's been on the title for a while. Now it's continuing on with Jim Zub, but now we've got Stephen as the artist. Stephen Cummings is the artist. Marcio Minez and Eric Arcaniga are the color artists. This book was pretty cool. It definitely continues exactly whatever they were just doing in Champions. They reference a lot of things about like Sam no longer having his Nova powers. That's news to me, so lots of drama kind of going on. It's a nice spotlight, having not read a book that spotlighted Kamala Khan for a minute, to see her spotlighted as the leader, a very efficient leader. The Champions have grown now, so not just their original roster of Amadeus and Miles and Kamala and Sam and Viv, of course, but they've grown out. They've got more characters. Some characters I don't know, other characters I do know, and it's cool to see them in a comic book, like Bombshell, for instance, or Power Man. Of course, Ironheart's in there as well, so it's a good mix of characters, but it did feel like it just held on a little too much to what came before. But it just seems like this is supposed to be the next issue of Champions, but it is a good jumping on point to see what's going on. Some interesting things were going on, but I don't know if it's going to keep my interest to continue to read that series, but I did kind of like the vibe of it. So we got another Infinity Wars story. This one's just Infinity #1. It's a one-shot, yet another epilogue, yet another Infinity Wars book. And on my live stream Sunday, I said, I'm not going to read it. Well, it's a very light week for me, so sucker that I am, I read it, and it's not that bad. It's got artwork by Mark Bagley. It's probably one of the reasons that encouraged me to read it, but it wasn't that bad. I thought it was pretty cool. Infinity Wars left a very, very bad taste in my soul after I finished that book. It just wore me out. It started off really interesting, and then it just turned into a muddy, convoluted mess, at least for me, and it did not nail the ending whatsoever. This starts, and it basically lets you know the fate of at least one of the Infinity Stones, because spoilers, at the end of Infinity Wars, the Infinity Stones, Adam Warlock sends them off into the universe, and they're supposed to become sentient and bond with people and choose their own host or something like that. So it tells you the story of one of that. It's a decent little setup, I guess, for some stuff that's coming up in that Wolverine and the Infinity Watch story. But if you really, really had a disdain for Infinity Wars, I mean, it's a pretty decent issue, but I don't know if it's not gonna turn you around on that book, at least in my opinion. Uncanny X-Men #8 is here. We're reaching the climax of X-Men Disassembled. You can feel it coming. The age of X-Men is vastly approaching. Decent issue. I'm liking this stuff right now. I think they're doing a great job. They've been doing a great job this year, especially the final part of 2018 of kind of dealing with some lingering plot threads with the X-Men and then getting it ready for a new direction. It still feels like that new direction is not quite here yet. It feels like we're not going to get that until after the Age of X-Men and all this stuff. This still just feels to me like cleaning house, but I'm rather enjoying it. I find it comparable to Avengers No Surrender that they did last year. So I'm liking this book. I think it's cool. I think it's a big just, getting the ship steady and ready for what they're about to be doing in 2019 for the X-Men. So it's kind of all set up, all just kind of shaking things out and loose. And it seems like every so often you got to do this with the X-Men books, especially because the X-Men books get really bogged down with a lot of dangling plot lines and stuff. But one X-Men book that I've been just delightfully enjoying every single month is Mr. and Mrs. X, and I never thought I'd be such a fan of Gambit and Rogue, much less Gambit and Rogue newlyweds, right? But I'm loving this. It's a great exploration in a freshly married couple. Someone that people they've already had an on-again, off-again relationship for obvious reasons, but they just are it's so endearing, it's so charming. I really like it. It's a nice, real, and honest look at dealing with this kind of a relationship, and it's also fun and just filled with lots of fun comic book throwbacks, especially to the early 90s X-Men days with Rogue and Gambit. Really fun stuff. Kelly Thompson does a great job with these characters. She does a great job with most characters that she tackles. I'm absolutely loving Mr. and Mrs. X. Tony Stark Iron Man #7 is here. Dan Slott's once again being assisted by Jeremy Whitley on the script. It's a continuation of the story about where they're in the little world, and it's all right. This book started off, and I thought it was neat because it had the return of some proper Iron Man villains. It just felt a little bit more old school. This still feels a little bit old school, but it's not telling me anything about Tony. Nothing is telling. This book is specifically Tony Stark Iron Man. If Tony Stark's name's on it, I need to know more about Tony Stark. This is more about some interesting ideas going around about artificial intelligence and free will and things like that, but there's not telling me anything about the character of Tony. I think we need to get back into just Tony Stark, who he is, focus in on that. Right now, there's too much other stuff going on. It's not really compelling to me that much anymore, and I hate it when this happens because I love reading Iron Man comic books, but they're not always the best at just engaging me, and for some reason, just right now, it's not really working for me that much. Killmonger #3, though, I love this book. Brian Hill, Juan Fiera, I believe, Fantastic work, great artwork, some amazing panel composition, fantastic stuff. Eduardo Fiera on the coloring assist, and Joe Sabino on the lettering. Look at that. Look at those layouts. Look at that composition. Really cool stuff. Great, luscious, and textured and rich coloring. A really fun story that's taking a villain who is going through a resurgence in popularity and motivation because of the recent Black Panther film, right? So it's taking the best of the movie, the best of the comics, merging it into one cool story. It's an origin story for Killmonger in the Marvel Universe, but it still has that sensibility from the movie. It's a great amalgam of both worlds. Fantastic stuff. Love the artwork, love the writing. Some of the best work I've ever read from Brian Hill has been in the pages of Killmonger, and it just is awesome. Absolutely. Marvel Knights number 5 is here, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Marvel Knights. We are. Donny Cates is joined by Matthew Rosenberg yet again for this issue. What's actually going on, maybe not quite so clear, maybe a little bit clear. I do like this story. It's a nice reflection on Marvel Knights and its legacy and on the characters that were involved in Marvel Knights. There's not as much Inhumans in here as I thought there would have been, but a lot of big focus on Black Panther, on the Punisher, on Daredevil, on Elektra. So I'm liking all this stuff, but there is a moment in this issue with Kingpin and Doom that no way. Other than that, pretty cool issue, great artwork. But that scene with Kingpin and Doom, no way. Doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Winter Soldier number 2 is out this week, and the first one, I thought it was all right. Rod Reese's artwork feels a little rushed, a little scratchy, a little too loose. It feels the same in here, but it's starting to work. I'm just starting to run with it. And the artwork does come across a lot better in this issue for me. Some really cool effects with the coloring, really great things they do in these flashback sequences. The story got a lot better too. It's a little cliche in times, but I think they even in the script mention it and talk about that, but I'm really liking it. I almost didn't read it because I had a very small, low impression. I almost couldn't even remember what had happened in issue 1. But I'm glad I read issue number 2. Issue 2 was way better than issue 1. It was very engaging, very cool, and a setup for a neat little story that kind of is going to harken back to some old school Nomad stuff, but slightly different anyway. I really liked Winter Soldier number 2. That's written by Kyle Higgins, by the way. Star Wars Age of Republic has a new one-shot out. Obi-Wan Kenobi, this is the best one yet. This really deals with some real issues about Obi-Wan and his feelings of inadequacy of being a teacher to young Anakin, right? So after the events of episode 1, we know this, he agrees to be the teacher for Anakin Skywalker, young Annie, because his mentor, Liam Neeson, Qui-Gon Jinn, he died, right, and passed the torch to him. He feels inadequate. Anakin feels inadequate. It's a really cool story. Great exploration to the character Obi-Wan. Really thought this was the best one so far of these Age of the Republic one-shots. They're about to get into the Rebellion as well, and then the Resistance. So a lot of just little one-shots focusing in on characters and from the Star Wars saga. This was the best one so far. I thought that was splendid. Over at DC, we got Heroes in Crisis number 4 is out this week. This issue's all right, pretty decent. The story's picking up a little bit more of a pace, though I would say that not a lot happens in here, but a lot of characters get involved in here. And it does have a pretty neat ending that has some weighty moments and a great dynamic scene between Clark and Bruce at the end that is so nailed on, spot on, perfect. What Batman says to Superman is Tom King is great with these characters, with their relationships. The mystery is still there. The gist of it is, though, some massacre has happened at Sanctuary, which is a place where the DC heroes can go to discuss the ramifications of the violent lives that they live, right? And things like that, and their trauma and their shared experiences, right? But everything's gone crazy. There was a big massacre there. It seems like the two main suspects are Harley Quinn and Booster Gold. It's a big whodunit, big mystery. I don't know if there are a lot of clues that are put throughout these issues. If there are, I'm missing some of them. But this has got a great little focus on some relationships, including a Batgirl Harley Quinn moment that I found really surprising and very well done, and some Booster Gold Blue Beetle action. So Heroes in Crisis number 4, not quite. I liked it. I did. I'm liking that book. Issue 4 is interesting. It's not as heavy to me as issue 3 was. Issue 3 felt really heavy. It doesn't really move too much forward yet. I don't think so. But it does set up some interesting character dynamics and relationships for the duration of that series. Action Comics 1006, the last part of the Invisible Mafia story by Brian Michael Bendis. Great artwork by Ryan Sook. Fantastic stuff. I really like the artwork. Really cool. I'm actually liking what Bendis has been doing on Superman. We've been talking about that. I think he understands the character. There's some scenes in here that I just absolutely love. I love the more grounded, down-to-earth, metropolis-based, Daily Planet-based focus of this book. I like that Superman's the big explosive one. This one's just a little bit more subtle. But it's still very fun. Great artwork by Ryan Sook, like I said. Bendis knows the character of Superman. There's a great little moment between Superman and a kid in an alleyway. That's just perfection in this one. One thing, though, it does end a story, and in typical Bendis fashion, he ends it very loosely. Very, very loosely. So, I wish Bendis would get to wrapping up his individual stories better. You can still leave things dangling while actually wrapping up the story. That being said, Bendis' stuff always works better to me when I go back and read it in one chunk, as probably how he thinks about it in his head when he writes it, like one big story, right? Anyway, Action Comics 1006 is out. We're moving up to Detective Comics 1000 with 995 out this week. A splendid issue, a great, well done, soon to be possibly important issue of Batman. Really cool stuff. Great artwork by the veterans Doug Mahnke. Peter Tomasi understands Batman. We know this. He's written Batman before. This is some great stuff in here. Some great pacing. Really gripping detective story that's going on. A mystery that's being built that is so personal to Bruce Wayne's life and so confounding to us as the readers. I can't pick up on anything about what's actually going on. I have some ideas, though. But some interesting things going on. I really like this issue. Thought it was great. Great pace. A great just sense of direness and dread in this issue of Detective Comics. Great stuff. Glad to see Tomasi turn that book back into a must-read. Flash number 61 is out this week, continuing the Force Quest. So now we're coming up on the person who now inhabits the Sage Force. And it's interesting where they turn out. That's neat. Christian Duce, or Deuce, or however you want to say his last name. I would love to actually know how you're supposed to say his last name. But great artwork, really cool stuff. I'm loving what Josh Williamson's been doing on Flash. I think sometimes the stories go on a little too long. Maybe stretches out a little too much. This almost felt like, I don't know, maybe it's like sometimes the stories are 7 issues. Maybe they could have been 5. Maybe it would have been a little bit better, a little bit tighter. So his Flash stories don't feel as tight to me as I would like them to be, but they're still really cool in concept and mostly in execution, and the artwork's pretty solid, and the characterization of Barry Allen has been spot on since day one of Joshua Williamson taking over. Issue 61, continuing on the Force Quest story, really fun stuff. But Justice League Odyssey is losing me every single issue. Do not like this one. Did not like this issue. Don't like the setup to the story. I think it's kind of silly, to be honest, this whole idea that's proposed in here. It's interesting to me what's kind of this new, more personality-driven dark side that's present in these pages, and that's interesting to me, but the characterization of characters like Azrael is so far off base, and seriously, trying to not spoil things, but Cyborg says booyah in here. Right? We know it's a reference to the movie. Remember? I'm not liking this one. I'm not liking Justice League of Odyssey. J-Lo's not doing it for me. Terrifics number 11, though, a great issue. So the Terrifics have split apart. They've disbanded, and this is the issue, the inevitable issue where they all realize that they are less without everybody else. Right? They're all go back to their normal, mundane lives, and maybe it's not all quite working out the way that they thought it was. And it's got a really cool, nifty ending, but I'm liking this one. Some great, solid artwork in this issue. The Terrifics, we know that Jeff Lemire's wrapping up his run, I think around issue 14 or something, so we're heading towards an ending or something. It's unclear whether or not the book's going to continue on without him. It would be a shame if it doesn't, because I think it's been amazing, but you got to get someone who kind of understands what Jeff Lemire does and what he's done so well with the Terrifics to make this book in fact, the only New Age of Heroes book that I still read, actually. From Vertigo Comics, we got Hex Wives number 3. Really cool issue. Really liking this story. Really fun stuff. This issue is titled, what is it? Yeah, Steppin' on the Gaslight. Thematically, it makes total sense. This story is about this coven of witches, and to get revenge on these witches, these men basically put a spell on them. So now they live in this suburban town because ages have passed, years have passed. They live in this suburban town and they're all just housewives, right? So think like the Stepford Wives a little bit. But it's very interesting. It speaks a lot on some relevant thematic issues, and it's just such a fun comic book and a very well done comic book. It's written by Ben Blacker. It's got artwork by Mirka Andolfo, Marisa Luis. They do a great job. Hexwives has been one of the standouts of many from Vertigo Comics. They're kind of nailing it right now. American Carnage, Hexwives, doing great stuff. Books of Magic is the only Sandman universe book that I'm continuing on reading, even though I do plan on trade weighting The Dreaming and Lucifer. But Books of Magic's a little bit more easier to digest. It's very, very simple. It's very brisk, very quick, and maybe it's one of the reasons why I'm not going to continue reading it. It's got a neat little story that's kind of set up, but the character of Tim Hunter, there's so much more richness there, so much more you can do than the sparse, kind of light on anything super heavy. Even though it tries to be heavy, it's not hitting me with any kind of real impact. Books of Magic is a nice, quick, fun comic book to read at times, but it doesn't really have any kind of resonating effect on me after I read it. So I don't know, but it's all right. It's not bad. It's all right. I think I'm going to trade weight all the Sandman universe stuff. I think it will definitely, all that will be better read in trade chunks. Redneck number 18 is here. This was a crazy issue. The last issue we had the wedding. It was great. It was lovely. It was crazy. Donny Cates just turned it around. Nothing but tragedy in this issue. Crazy stuff. Weird thing with the framing of the story structure. I almost don't like it. Almost like it did give, I don't want to spoil anything. You get this sense of dread throughout this whole book. The way, the technique that Case uses for that, I don't know. That kind of took me out of it a little bit, took me out of the shock, but I'm not going to spoil anything more. This was an excellent issue of Redneck. This book gets better and better. And one thing I really want to point out just from that first page right there, man, D. Caniff, what an amazing job coloring this book. A fantastic job. So I'm not going to spoil anything about the book, but the coloring, definitely got to spotlight it. It's amazing. It's a vampire story called Redneck, about redneck vampires by Donny Cates. Come on. You know you want to read that if you haven't already. Crowded number 6 is here. This is the end of the first arc of Crowded. This is a fantastic book. It's written by Christopher Sabella. It's got Rose Stein artwork, Ted Brandt, Triona Farrell, Cardinal Ray all involved. Real fun, dynamic, really utilizes the comic book technique. It's very conscious of the space on the page is what I'm trying to say. This is a really, really fun book. I've enjoyed it this whole time. Great characters. This is the end of the first arc, and it's a great setup on what's to come, and it sets it up splendidly well. This could be something that could have easily just been 6 issues, and they could have ended the story here, but the way that they set it up, it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel rushed, it feels organic, it feels natural, and I am super excited to read the continuing adventures of Crowded. Fantastic stuff. And finally, let's talk about Archie, because I read Archie 701, because on Archie 700, I thought Nick Spencer did a good job. Basically, what they're doing at Archie right now is, just a couple years ago, they reinvigorated the title of Archie. They canceled the old school, all ages, you know that Archie, right? Very cartoony and very silly, just jokey and things like that. They canceled that one and they rebooted it as more grounded, more down-to-earth, more realistic, especially for a 2019 we are in now, but at the time it was like, what, 2015 or something? So Mark Waid did that. Fiona Staples helped come on and redesign that universe. Now you got Riverdale that's like just blazing things up over at CW and Netflix right now. So what they've done is they've taken an opportunity to bring in a new writer, Nick Spencer, and kind of merge Mark Waid's vision with that Riverdale success. So it's not as dark or soap opera-y. It's very soap opera, but it's not as dark or Twin Peaks-esque, right, as Riverdale could be, right? But it is a little bit darker than what Waid was doing. Some interesting stuff, though. The characters are still there, and the big twist right now is the introduction of Sabrina into Riverdale. Really excited about that. I've always loved the character Sabrina. Melissa Joan Hart, the old school comic book series. Really like that character, so this is some interesting stuff for an old school Archie fan. I think it's worth it. Definitely check it out. So that's what I read this week. Not a lot that I read, but that is a lot of comics. So what did you read? What are you excited for? Let me know in the comments down below. And thank you so much for checking out the video. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And join us over at Facebook at our Facebook group, the PCP Army. That's where you can chat with me and other members of the PCP Army about comic books, movies, pop culture, and life. So thank you guys so much for rocking with us. I'm Rockin Robbie Billups. Join us at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts and a whole lot more. Thanks for rocking with us. Keep on reading.